Hello, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about investing cash back to basics by Mark Camp and Amadou Haney. So the executive summary of this chapter is to have regard about risk and security when deciding where to invest. A guarantee is only as good as the giver, and there is no such thing as an absolute guarantee. So when investing cash, we've got to use our internal resources if there is a fully functioning professional treasury, to use your clearing bank or custodian, to use a specialized investment manager, and lastly, to use suitable pooled funds or money market funds, perhaps through a treasury portal. So, money market funds offer different yields and returns. So, before investing, we've got to prioritize between yield, security, and liquidity, and also to carry out detailed due diligence. Simplicity and transparency are key factors, and the current crisis has highlighted the importance of liquidity and credit. So let's deep dive into those points. Here are some lessons from recent experience in financial markets. It has become crystal clear that cash must be treated as a separate asset class. This means taking care when considering how and with whom cash should be held and invested. It is equally clear that risk is a very relevant factor for cash. Institutional investors have discovered in the past year that so-called safe cash investments have not been as secure as they thought. For many years, investors have ignored the fundamental principle that extra yield is associated with extra risk. And it is now clear that the, the especially attractive rates paid by Icelandic banks came with a significant additional risk. In times of plenty, we tend to overlook or downplay risk and concentrate on the rewards. All we tend to think about is who is top of the league table so that I can maximize my interest income. And what can be all too easily forgotten is that the return of your money is always more important than the return on your money. So, a flight to quality or perceived safety can quickly become an unstoppable tsunami that can take the good with the bad. Witness the ever lengthening queue outside Northern Rock, a British bank, last September, and the subsequent effect on confidence in all British banks. Everyone now wants a guarantee and an absolutely safe investment. What does guarantee itself mean? We now know that it is only as good as the counterparty that gives it. Having to worry about counterparty risk is something most of us thought was the thankless and purely box ticking task of compliance officers or the credit committee. Now we know better. It must be stressed that it is very unusual for an institutional investor to receive a specific guarantee on a cash placement, except to the extent of that a bank or investment product receives overt support from a relevant authority that one trusts. What no one wants to say is that ultimately there is no absolute guarantee. This may seem more obvious now after a year in which we have seen that AAA credit ratings do not guarantee security, and that even the government guarantee is only as good as the economic strength of the country that gives it. The whole financial world is built on confidence, and if that is fatally cracked, then the whole pack of cards can come down, with disastrous economic consequences for us all. That's why all the major governments and central banks, in both West and East, finally acted as decisively as they did toward the end of 2008, coughing up some 6.75 trillion US dollars to save the world. This is equivalent to some 10% of the entire 65 trillion US dollars global economy. This was the source of data from CIA World Factbook 2007. And this has been used to recapitalize banks, buy up toxic assets, including subprime related assets, to make loans to financial institutions, and give state guarantees to get the wholesale markets moving again. Even with the size of this unprecedented rescue, risk remain in the financial system, according to a recent Bank of England financial stability report. So, what choices does a treasurer have when investing cash? Well, very large treasury operations. The very largest holders of cash can afford to run a well-resourced internal treasury, including a fully functioning cash desk. Aside from the major banks, however, such entities are few in number, as you have to be investing very large amounts on a daily basis to do this properly. Treasuries with small or intermittent balances. At the other end of the scale, if one has cash balances that arise only intermittently, or if they are less than 1.5 million US dollars, leaving them with your main clearing banks, having done appropriate due diligence and negotiated the best available rates, is probably the best approach. And another way is that netting and pooling are a must. It is assumed that any treasurer will have already maximized any pooling, netting, and aggregating possibilities across currencies if necessary, as these always offer the best value operationally and economically, and usually in terms of security too. For treasuries in the middle ground, the main strategic options are as follows. So we are moving into treasury in the middle ground right now. The first way is to utilize internal resources. So this has been an attractive option in the past, often because it is considered a low-cost option. But what are the risks involved with this approach? Even if one hires a good cash specialist, where is the backup? If he or she falls under the proverbial bus, where is the backup for the credit specialist? It is no longer good enough to rely solely on the credit rating of agencies or review the agreed counterparty list once a year. Instrument and counterparty credit ratings are just one of the guides to utilize, and they can, and they should, be challenged from time to time. Certainly, just calling your friendly money broker from time to time for advice cannot now be considered best practice. Secondly, outsource to a specialist provider or treasury portal. The bank. The first option is to see what your clearing bank or custodian, if that's relevant, can provide, especially if cash can be automatically swept on a daily basis. The problem here is risk concentration with just one or only a handful of counterparties. A good example of this type of situation is a hedge fund with a single prime broker. Not only does the fund have a serious risk with the prime broker as the derivative counterparty, but a cash margin collateral would typically be held with the same party, doubling the counterparty risk. Before the Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers troubles, the main global prime brokers were considered too big to fail. This is not the position now. And another way is the investment manager. If an institution has large and relatively stable cash balances to invest, then an investment manager can be approached to run a segregated cash mandate. The advantage of this approach is that you get to choose the investment manager and you can also specify the investment parameters, and benchmark. And in that way, you can control the risk. Now, invested cash should also be held with a third-party custodian, thus ring-fencing the assets from the investment manager. The downside is that it is relatively cumbersome and it's expensive process to set up in the first place, and it is not very flexible. A serious bespoke cash investment manager will usually require a large minimum investment balance of 150 million US dollars plus and or minimum fees. Frequent redemption or movements generally in the mandate will not be welcome as they can materially affect investment strategies and performance. Such arrangements best suit long-term investment cash and not volatile cash investment. And lastly, for this segment is pooled funds. Now, money market funds have been invaluable to many corporate and institutional treasurers in the recent years, freeing them from the task of spreading their funds around the various banks. However, money market funds come in many guises, and as some investors have found to their cost, some of these funds have invested in assets that have proved to be far from low risk. Oh, that wasn't the last one. Okay, the last one is treasury portals. The use of portals is extensive in the United States and brings operational efficiencies if one is a multi-fund user. Such portals are now available in Europe.